and legacy of Florida's own Gram Parsons on the eve of his induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Then, the signature potion of one of Florida's earliest and most successful snake oil salesmen is resurrected by two beverage industry veterans. We'll tell you how Munion's pawpaw elixir got a second life. And a local after-school and summer program receives its largest grant in its 35-year history. What the money means for the kids at Sanctuary on 8th Street. Join the conversation. Give us a call on air at 904-549-2937 or head to firstcoastconnect.org where you can find all the ways to connect with us. Stick around. We'll be back right after the news.
From NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. To mark Cuban Independence Day, Secretary of State Marco Rubio issued a Spanish-language message to the Cuban people. NPR's Ada Peralta reports it comes as the U.S. ratchets up pressure against the government.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio says Cuba is suffering not because of a U.S. blockade, but because their government has placed the good of a few insiders ahead of the good of the Cuban people. Rubio said the only thing in the way of a better future for Cuba is the people who control their country. If owning your own business and having the right to vote is possible outside Cuba, he said, why is it not possible for you inside Cuba? Rubio spoke as the Justice Department prepared to announce an indictment against former Cuban President Raul Castro. Cuba has said the U.S. is simply trying to justify an illegal and inhumane military intervention against Cuba. Ada Peralta, NPR News, Miami.
President Trump says he was an hour away from making a decision to launch new strikes against Iran. He says he called them off. NPR's Franco Ordonez reports Trump says he's giving Iran a couple of days or maybe a week to reach a new deal with the U.S.
He said he delayed the strikes because of, quote, serious negotiations happening with Iran. Now, J.D. Vance, the vice president, he later expanded on Trump's remarks, but he also kind of gave a slightly different characterization of the prospects. But Vance did say there were two pathways for Iran: continue to negotiate or restart the military campaign.
NPR's Franco Ordonez reporting. Results are coming in from primary elections in 6 states yesterday. One of the most closely watched was a battle for a single congressional seat in Kentucky. NPR's Domenico Montanaro reports President Trump played a key role in this race.
Trump is on something of a revenge tour. The latest casualty, Congressman Thomas Massie of Kentucky. He lost to a Trump-backed challenger by about 10 points Tuesday night, and he saw tens of millions of dollars spent against him. In fact, it was the most expensive House primary in history, with $33 million spent on TV ads. Massie was a thorn in Trump's side, helping force the release of millions of pages of the Epstein files, for example. Now he joins a list of perceived political enemies that Trump has gone after, often successfully, in GOP primaries. But while Trump has proven his strength with the Republican base, general elections are a different story, and that'll likely put Republican candidates in swing districts in tough positions this fall. Domenico Montanaro, NPR News, Washington.
President Trump has made an endorsement in the Texas Republican runoff election for the U.S. Senate. Incumbent John Cornyn is seeking re-election. Trump has decided to back his challenger, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. Many U.S. GOP senators are backing Cornyn. Trump's endorsement could help Paxton win the primary runoff, but could make it more difficult for Republicans to fend off a Democratic challenger. This is NPR.
Good morning. You're listening to WJCT News, 89.9 in Jacksonville. I'm Stephen Ponson. It is 9:04. All lanes are now open on I-95 North at State Road 9B from a crash that had lanes blocked through that area, but a right lane remains blocked on the East Beltway southbound at Pulaski Road from a disabled vehicle this hour. A Nassau County high school teacher is one of 5 finalists for Florida Teacher of the Year. Sarah Twardy teaches U.S. History and Government at Fernandina Beach High School. Among her achievements, the 92% student pass rate on the U.S. History end-of-course exam, the highest in the school's history. The Florida Department of Education released the list yesterday of finalists. The winner will be announced in July. Governor Ron DeSantis is continuing his pledge to hold a special session to put property tax relief on the ballot. Speaking at a news conference this week, the governor said his plan will focus on homesteaded properties and homeowners would need to have lived in Florida for a set amount of time to be eligible.
You are going to have Canadians, honestly, some of these rich people that come from Brazil, they'll buy this big house in like Coconut Grove in South Florida. I don't care if they get taxed. I don't want to. Why would I care about giving them a tax cut? I want to help Floridians with that.
Local governments have long expressed concern about proposed reductions since property tax revenues make up about 30% of their funding, but the governor downplayed that worry. Any proposal to cut property taxes would need the approval of at least 60% of Florida voters in November. Right now, temperatures are in the upper 70s with sunny skies in Jacksonville.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Eric and Wendy Schmidt through the Schmidt Family Foundation, working toward a healthy, resilient, secure world for all. On the web at theschmidt.org. This is NPR.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
The long influence and short life of Gram Parsons. Welcome to First Coast Connect. I'm Ann Schindler. Today, we talk to the author of his definitive biography, from the birth of alt country to his tragic death at age 26. Later in the program, the healing tonic of a medical huckster makes it back on the market, this time as a popular Florida-made liqueur. But first, Bob Kealing is a 6-time Emmy and 2-time Murrow award-winning journalist. He's also the author of 4 books, including the definitive biography titled Calling Me Home, Gram Parsons and the Roots of Country Rock. He joins us now to discuss the musician's long influence and short life ahead of his induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Bob, thanks so much for joining us.
No, Ann, it's my pleasure. Great to be back on First Coast Connect, and what a great reason to be back on.
Well, this announcement just a little over a month ago of Gram Parsons' induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, were you surprised either by the announcement or by the fact that the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is inducting him before the Country Music Hall of Fame?
Yeah, I think that's a good distinction. I was a little bit surprised because I thought he would be recognized for what he liked to call his regressive country music. But it is a great surprise, and I think it's important to point out too that he was elected as an influence more so than an artist, but it's a great first step nonetheless.
And explain to us why that is. His influence is really a huge part of his legacy. He's sometimes called the father of country rock. His modern day attributes, his fans often link him to bands like the Avett Brothers or the Jayhawks or Wilco, these sort of alt country modern day performers, but he really was a pioneer in that field.
Absolutely. Jay Farrar, Sunvolt, on and on. And you go back to his very first record with a group called the International Submarine Band in 1967. And that's where he started writing the primer for the whole country rock movement. There he is with his mustache, and but he starts laying the groundwork there. And then in 68, he has a short association with the Byrds and is the driving force behind their landmark record, Sweetheart of the Rodeo. From that, he moves on to his own group with Chris Hillman of the Byrds called the Flying Burrito Brothers, which absolutely was about country rock. And you see those magnificent nudie suits that have actually been in the Country Music Hall of Fame. Again, just to underscore how deeply influential they are and were. These were long hairs playing country music back in 68 and 69. This was nothing short of revolutionary. And the guy who replaced Gram in the Burrito Brothers was Bernie Ledden of Gainesville, who went on to join a group maybe you've heard of called the Eagles in 1971, and the rest is history.
Since you mentioned the Flying Burrito Brothers, I would like to listen to a song by them. This is a song that shows some of those characteristics that have carried on to today. It's called Devil in Disguise. Let's listen to a little and then we'll talk about this tune named for someone in particular. They changed the name later on to Devil in Disguise, but this was their debut album, the Flying Burrito Brothers, called The Gilded Palace of Sin. And it has certain sounds I wonder if you can comment on. We're hearing this different kind of pedal steel guitar, these intertwined vocals. There's you can hear echoes of the Grateful Dead. You can hear sort of elements of later rock and roll and country. What do you hear when you listen to that?
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail right on the head. I mean, think about it. This is 1968, 69. We're talking about Woodstock and Hendrix, and not many cool bands are playing country music. But see, that's how far ahead of his time Gram Parsons was. And Dylan follows that lead with Nashville Skyline. And it's just highly influential at a time. It's paying homage to country music as a legitimate American art form through people like George Jones. Back when country wasn't cool yet, not at all. So this was really going out on a limb. And just from hearing that, and as you mentioned, the mix of steel guitar and things like dobro and a rock and roll band, it was unheard of.
You talk about the crossover, and it's hard sometimes for modern ears to appreciate how different something sounds when you've grown up listening to it. And that mix of country and rock and roll has become very familiar to all of us. But at the time, can you describe what the relations were between the world of young rock and roll fans and more traditional country music fans? And I want to talk in particular about his wearing of these nudie suits, which were named for the man who made them, the tailor, whose last name was Nudie. They wore those. They were very traditional at the time in the Nashville music scene, these kind of flashy rhinestone, sometimes studded suits. Graham's was a little different.
It was. If you look at some of the motifs on said nudie suit, it sort of made a pretty obvious homage to some of the things that kids of his age were pursuing at the time. I think that's pretty clearly a marijuana leaf. But from a socio-political point of view, country music was seen as and it was probably broad brush this way, but it was the music of the establishment of Nixon and the people who were the love it or leave it crowd at a time when the Vietnam War was raging, and there was the America love it or leave it crowd, and that's not what Graham was about. He had this zeal about pointing out the importance of people like Merle Haggard and Johnny Cash and George Jones as American poets. He strongly believed that. So it was about the music and certainly not the politics associated with, loosely associated with country music at the time.
So let's talk about his Florida connections, because we're talking about him sort of as, in the abstract, this great musician with this enormous legacy in music. But he has Georgia roots, certainly, born in Waycross, but a lot of deep Florida roots. And in your research for this book, you really got, into the granular level of the life that he led, his friends, his family, and the hangouts that he frequented, or in some cases owned, or his family owned.
Without a doubt. And this is the book here, Calling Me Home. And a lot of people did think that Graham was born in Waycross, and there was a lot of association with him being from there, and rightfully so, but he was actually born in Winter Haven. And that's where his mother and father were married, and his mom's dad, his maternal grandfather, was a very rich citrus baron, if you will. In fact, they owned all the property that Legoland is situated on now down in Winter Haven. In fact, that mansion was that belonged to Graham's extended family, and his mother and father were married there. So Graham had very deep Florida roots, and he was very into the music of Elvis, was a huge influence. So were the Beatles. But what was wonderful about Central Florida specifically was they had this very furtive, what I call youth center scene, where very important musicians like Tom Petty, Dwayne and Greg Allman, even Jim Stafford, the comedian who's a brilliant guitarist, they all played on this furtive youth center scene throughout Central and North Florida. And they learned how to write music and tour very early on. And it was hugely important. And it's a great legacy for the Sunshine State.
One of the places that eventually grew out of that was Derry Down, which is in Winter Haven and is restored. I want to talk about that a little bit because I think it's in large part to your efforts that it has been restored and not destroyed. But at the time, this was a burgeoning folk music scene. And you write in your book that it was difficult for these young musicians or even, 20-year-old musicians to find a place to play. Why was it? What was happening in terms of the political realities of the time that was making it difficult for folk music to find a home in Florida?
I think at the time, folk music was just evolving. It was running its course. You remember Dylan went electric in 1965, and that's when everything shifted. At that point, Graham was still in a country band called the Shilohs. I'm sorry, a folk band. But once he saw where Dylan was going, he quickly went electric too. So I think it was a part of a larger trend as far as that's concerned. But yeah, the Derry Down, Graham's best childhood friend is the one who told me about that. And there you see the kids all packed in there dancing in the mid 60s. He played his first professional gig there on December 20th, 1964. This is where Graham literally and his folk band, the Shilohs, first played. And that cannot be overstated how important that was. They were still kids, and there wasn't a great infrastructure to support music of that nature. And his mom and stepdad opened that facility specifically so his band would have a place to play. Fast forward many years, and his best friend showed me this dilapidated warehouse in downtown Winter Haven, full of bric-a-brac, and looked like could be knocked down if you just gave it a good shove. And that was the old Derry Down, and that was the beginning of a wonderful journey to bring that place back as a tribute to Graham.
And it is now a fully restored cultural center where people like Amanda Shires and Todd Snyder and Jim Lauderdale played over the years. But it was essentially a teen music club. There are so many interesting things about Gram Parsons' life, and you really, you get to so many of them. They're strange and almost theatrical. I just want to talk a little bit about, here you have a kid that was raised amid incredible wealth, which, was no small thing in being a determinant in his life. But he also grew up in this small town of Waycross where he was buying records, I guess, at the hardware store, and was, honing his sound. He saw Elvis at age 9, which just seems like a remarkable and formative moment for him. Also alongside the Louvin brothers and Mother Maybelle and the Carter sisters. So he was immersed very early in this incredible sound that was happening at the time.
Yeah, it's the primer right there, isn't it? You really put your finger on it. And what's interesting is that was Elvis's Florida tour in 1956. And that was the one date that they did play just over the state line in Waycross. And after the untimely death of Graham's dad in Christmas of 1958, his mother moved Graham and the family back to Winter Haven so she could be closer to family. So Graham's formative years, his teenage years, were actually spent more so in Central Florida than Waycross, where he did spend a significant amount of time, no doubt about it. And the groundwork was set for his love of music by seeing Elvis there at City Auditorium. And one of the interviews I really enjoyed doing was actually with Charlie Louvin in the place where they opened for Elvis. And Charlie pointed out, there were some times that Elvis opened for us too, which I thought was great. But, the tracks of his life in the South, to me, were just so compelling. And I think it's translated through the course of this book. And I just could not be more proud of sort of being the person who threw the pebble in the pond for the Derry Down. And thanks to a wonderful grassroots group of people like Main Street Winter Haven who came together, and people donated electrical services and things like that. We had Chris Hillman there in 2017. And boy, when he and Herb Peterson and John Jorgensen went into Turn, 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 I don't think there was a dry eye in the place.
In addition to the interesting circumstances, there were a lot of tragic circumstances in young Gram Parsons' life, including a mother who suffered from alcoholism. And you alluded to his father's suicide, but tell us a little bit more about that. He was a very young boy at the time that occurred, and it was right around the holidays.
Well, and one of the things I bristle about is people are like, oh, Graham was rich, so he couldn't have had any troubles at all. But unfortunately, alcoholism just ran like canker through an orange crop, and it took a devastating toll. He lost his father in 58. His mother died in the hospital of alcohol-related symptoms on the day he graduated from the Bowles School up in Jacksonville, and that's in 65, and that's why he was there with his grandparents. In pictures of that, you can see he had this sort of haunted look on his face because at a time of such great joy, he had lost his mom. So he dealt with a lot of tragedy in that sense. And growing up was by no means easy for Gram Parsons just because his family had money.
These were times, too, when his father took his life or when his mother died, that it was sort of the information was shared and then it was like move on. There wasn't much discussion of it. And in fact, there was, with this father's suicide, it was essentially covered up by the local media. It was not discussed. And his mother's death, as you say, kind of continued on that day with his graduation as if perhaps it hadn't even occurred.
Well, and, thank goodness for music. I really think it was Graham's lifeline at a time when he was rudderless. He basically was raising himself, flunked one of his school years at Winter Haven High, but then managed to get back on track. And with his stepfather, Bob Parsons, pulling some strings, was able to get him accepted to the Bowles School, which had been a military academy, but it really got Graham back on track. Bowles was just a godsend for him. He got into theater, he got into music, he got on track, and he actually got accepted to Harvard after he graduated.
And briefly attended. If you're just joining us, we are talking about the life and legacy of Florida's own Gram Parsons with Bob Kealing. He's a journalist and author of Calling Me Home, a biography of Gram Parsons. Of course, Gram Parsons will be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in November. If you have a question for Bob or a musical memory to share, you can give us a call at 904-549-2937, or you can go to firstcoastconnect.org to find all the ways that you can connect with us. You mentioned the Bowles School. Obviously, that's located here in Jacksonville. He attended that school twice. I think he got kicked out twice, as a matter of fact. Correct me if I'm wrong there, but he attended a middle school when it was more of a military school. He returned and graduated from there in high school. But it was, at least the second time around, a fairly welcoming and sheltering place for him, having gone through all he'd gone through at that point.
Yeah, and as I had alluded to before, and the second time around, it was great. But yeah, the first time was rough. I mean, it was the marching and the wearing uniforms. And this is 1958, and he's a 12-year-old kid who suddenly and shatteringly loses his father without any explanation. And yeah, he really struggled. And it was not an amicable parting at Bowles the first time. But when Graham went back the second time, it was a completely different scene. And it was not so heavily emphasized with the military aspect. And as I've said before, it was a lifeline for him. So really, the bottom line is Bowles was extremely positive in Graham's life as a young adult, as his formative years, and having the gravitas of Bowles as having come from there. That's a big part of why he got accepted to Harvard. That's where he immersed himself in the music scene, and then he was off to the West Coast, and the rest is history.
And he also formed lifelong friends during that period, including a girl that he dated who went to a sister school of Bowles at the time, Bartram, who actually was present when he died. Is that right?
Yeah, her name was Margaret Fisher. And she's a very tragic figure in this story as well. She came from a wealthy family herself. And we went up and, we met with Graham's teacher, Rufus McClure, up there. And we walked in the little portico where she and Graham had met, which was wonderful. I mean, you just really felt the presence of history as we talked. And one of the things that really stuck with me in writing the book was we were at a restaurant there in Jack's, and we were talking, and then she just kind of looked at me and had this moment of clarity and said, imagine being defined by the worst day of your life. And I thought that applied not just to her because she was with Graham when he suffered his unfortunate overdose. So it applied to him and his legacy for a long time, but it also applied to her because that defined her. And I thought, okay, that was really a mantra for taking a new approach to Graham's story. And now that he has this wonderful election to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, this is also a big step in his legacy, moving away from all of the tragic comic details of his unfortunately young demise.
Yeah. And we'll get to that in a little bit, but I do want to take a
Yeah.
call from Arvid in Springfield. Good morning, Arvid. Go ahead.
Hey, how you doing, Ann? Great show. Thanks for taking my call.
Of course.
I wanted to touch on Gram Parsons' wealth as sort of hindered his success in the fact that, so to speak, he was never really hungry coming up. And so as a lot of the times he would prefer to hang out with his rich rock star friends as opposed to pursuing his job. And that had a tendency, I think, to alienate him from his band members, so to speak, because they were without his trust fund that's basically supported him, so he could more or less come and go as he pleased. I read somewhere where their appearance at the Altamont Speedway concert was totally financed by Gram Parsons to get the band, from Southern California up there. So I just wanted to see if you could, is that touched on in the book, and maybe you could talk about a little bit about that.
Thanks, Arvid. Your thoughts,
Yeah,
Bob?
Altamont was just a train wreck, out in the middle of nowhere, and the Hells Angels, beating the hell out of people and stabbing someone to death. I mean, it was just that was cursed from the get-go. And yeah,
And we should just say that was a free concert in 1969, as you say, on the West Coast. And Hell's Angels were hired essentially by the Rolling Stones to provide some kind of security. They ended up fatally stabbing someone, and there was 4 deaths altogether. So, yeah, go ahead.
it's awful. I think it is a fair criticism to say that, Graham was this trust fund kid, and because of that, he'd get his annual payout, and he didn't really have to work and grind the way musicians often do to be successful. And if he decided he was going to move on, he could drop somebody, pretty quickly. That is pretty common in the world of rock and roll. If it's not working, we got to move on. So I do think that's a fair criticism, and it's sort of been often mentioned. But I do think also inheriting the family's history of alcoholism and having 2 parents die tragically by the time you graduate high school, I think he would have given back all his wealth to not have to suffer that kind of trauma throughout his life. And I would still hang on to the fact that music was the knot that, was at the end of his rope, thankfully. And he will always be seen as a pioneering visionary in the world of music. And now his election to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame just underscores that.
Do you have a sense? I've seen some estimates that, just to kind of put a frame on his actual wealth, that he would get these annual payouts from the estate or from the trust that in today's dollars would be somewhere close to $400,000 a year. Does that sound about right to your ears?
I remember his friend Jim Carlton, who was very close with him during the Winter Haven years and actually played in a group called the Legends with him. And he said he could remember sitting at the Holiday Inn and Graham counting out his money from the trust fund. And I think he said back then it was about $30,000. And he would, offer some to his friends who needed it. So I remember the figure of 30,000 in the 1960s. So if you multiply that, that's what we're talking about. That's the figure I've heard specifically.
We talked a little bit about his death. That is obviously something that in your work and your writing, I think you've tried to push back on the narrative that has made it so dominant in the story of Gram Parsons. But I do think we need to at least run through the outlines of it because it is tragic, but also super bizarre. And it is, a part of his story. So he died of an apparent overdose at Joshua Tree. And then there was this bizarre circumstance that happened afterwards. Can you tell us what happened?
Yeah, the wonderful guitarist Clarence White, who was with the Byrds, was killed by a drunk driver just about a year before Graham's death. And Graham was at the funeral, and many of them were imbibing, I guess, just to try to help get through it because it was so tragic. But just sort of the formality of it and everything, Graham was overheard saying, "Oh, if this, don't let them do this to me, take me out in the desert, et cetera, et cetera." And his road manager at the time took that to heart when Graham tragically overdosed in Joshua Tree in 1973. And he actually got his hands on a hearse, convinced the folks at LAX, where Graham's body was going to be shipped back south for a proper funeral, and convinced them to release the body to him. He takes it out to Joshua Tree, tries to perform this funeral pyre, lit it, takes off, abandons the body, and the fire goes out, and his body was discovered by park rangers. And far from being this heroic story that you often hear, it caused his family great pain. Graham died on his little half-sister's birthday, and they had to find out that all of this craziness had happened, which just made the situation worse. And as Margaret Fisher said, for the longest time, his legacy, I felt, had been defined by the worst day of his life, and it was time to change that. So that's it in a nutshell.
One of the positive legacies of Gram Parsons certainly is Emmylou Harris, who he is credited with not just introducing to the world and giving her her big break, but also converting her to country music. She'd been a folk musician and really was resistant initially to country music. She's now a 14-time Grammy Award winner. But they performed together and had a wonderful musical partnership. I want to take a listen to this song that was a Grammy-nominated duet that they did that was released on his posthumous album, Grievous Aim, continued on to be a superstar. And as we mentioned, multiple Grammy Award winner. So in some ways, she definitely is a voice that carries forward a positive legacy, which I think is something that your book also accomplishes, is just kind of reminding us of how much he touched in his life.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And Emmylou is just amazing. And I think whatever people think of Gram Parsons, I think everyone can agree that his taking her out on the road for the first time with the Fallen Angels in 1973 was set the groundwork for everything else that happened. And along the way, they picked up an unknown guitarist from Colorado by the name of Jock Bartley, who helped save the tour. And Jock became one of the founding members of the group Firefall. And he's a great guy. And that's what's important, I think, when you look at Graham, is there are a lot of people who died young. You think of Cobain, you think of Hendrix, you think of Joplin. And, talking to people like Roger McGuinn for the book, they say, "There, but for the grace of God go I." People used drugs back then, and it's not making excuses. It was just a reality of the music scene. And some did not survive. And it is nice to see Graham's legacy finally moving beyond these tragicomic events and people realizing this is a guy who gave Emmylou Harris her wings and influenced so many bands that we all love today. And really, in the final analysis, him being elected as an influencer, highly appropriate.
Yeah.
And it's just another wonderful step to see happen in his legacy. And many of us wish he were still here, because boy, he and Emmylou, the things they would have done. And I remember talking to Rodney Crowell, and he said, Graham opened the door for me because he's the one who took Graham's place in her hot band and did all of the tours after that. So
Well,
it's quite a story.
We're going to leave it there. Bob Kealing is a journalist and author of Calling Me Home, Gram Parsons and the Roots of Country Rock. Bob, thank you so much for being here. And called one of Florida's earliest and most successful snake oil salesmen and America's most colorful medical huckster. But his signature elixir continues to captivate customers. Here to tell us about Munion's pawpaw liqueur is reporter Steve Dollar. He recently profiled the product and its creators in Flamingo magazine. Steve, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks.
So this is a papaya-based drink, but it is fascinating in part because of the man behind the product. This is something that was created by a Dr. James Munion. What can you tell us about him and his reputation down in the... Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he was just this super larger-than-life character, kind of a Renaissance man who saw this really interesting opportunity down in South Florida. He bought the Lake Worth Lagoon estuary and put in a resort hotel for Northerners called the Hotel Hygeia back in 1904. And as an inducement for people to come down there, he sort of advertised it as a fountain of youth and began bottling so-called homeopathic remedy using fermented papayas, which grew abundantly on the island, combined with many, many other ingredients. And, papayas were called pawpaws in the area back at that time.
And not to be confused with, there is actually a fruit called the pawpaw. This is not that.
Correct. And that the pawpaw is actually, the largest native edible fruit in America, apparently. So this was all kind of at the turn of the century when these sort of, medicine shows, the word snake oil. I mean, guys would go around in these caravans with entertainers and then sell this stuff to unlikely or unsuspecting audiences, and people thinking that had some sort of secret ingredient that would improve their health and fix all their problems.
Sure. Interestingly, Dr. Munion was not a doctor, but this was this homeopathic remedy that he said cured everything from rheumatism to nervousness to
Right.
sleeplessness. But when you talk about a secret ingredient, there was a little bit of a secret ingredient. Tell us what you learned when you were doing this reporting.
Okay, so I was talking to Paul Massey and Joe Colucci, who are two liquor industry veterans. And back a few years ago, 2022, they decided they wanted to kind of go out on their own and create their own brand, their own liquor to market. And they came across this story, and they were really fascinated with it. And these days it's like it can't just be a product; it's also got to have a narrative behind it. And in a way, the narrative was just too good to pass up. And they basically did a lot of research on it. They found this scientist who had actually written the biography of Dr. Munion and tracked him down and, did all this, had many conversations with him. And they came across that they themselves found an original bottle of this the remedy and sent it to the scientist who did an analysis on it and discovered that the magic ingredient was THC.
Wow.
The active ingredient in marijuana.
And this was a product that Dr. Munion was prescribing for basically anyone 5 and older. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't unlike, Coca-Cola used to have actually cocaine in it. So there were a lot of
different
things.
Times.
Yeah, different times,
right.
For sure.
So this, when they recreated this liqueur, the Munion's pawpaw, it does not have THC in it. This one is a relatively low alcohol by volume product. What does it taste like? What are the ingredients?
I mean, it's obviously the pawpaw, and then I don't know, it's maybe, oh gosh, a dozen, 16 different herbal elements that are in it. It has a very mild taste. As you said, it's not high in alcohol content, but it has just a very mild vibe to it. I think Colucci said it's like if Grand Marnier and Aperol had a baby. And I think that's pretty accurate. But it's got things like orange, cane sugar, elderflower, hibiscus. These are elements that are in probably a lot of different liqueurs. Dialed in for specific taste profiles. It mixes really well with tonic or seltzer. You can put it in margaritas, old fashions, anything that you would use some of those other aperitifs for. It also would work very well.
I saw also in Flamingo magazine a recipe for a drink called the Florida Smoke Show, which is basically mezcal, pawpaw, lime juice, and agave, which sounded just shaken over ice. Sounds like a very perfect.
Yeah, I think that'd be very good. Yeah, I basically sipped a lot of it just on its own, on ice or whatever, and it's just it's got a really nice flavor, and it's not going to get you terribly buzzed. It's just a very enjoyable. Makes for a really enjoyable summer drink. That's for sure.
Yeah, well. True Florida and Florida history. Reporter Steve Dollar, his recent piece appeared in Flamingo magazine. Steve, thanks so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Oh, sorry, I'm getting a little bit fuzzy here.
No, you're great. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, great. Thanks.
All right, up next, a local nonprofit receives its largest grant in its 35-year history. What the money means for the kids at Sanctuary on 8th Street. Welcome back. Well, since it was established in 1992, Sanctuary on 8th Street has grown from a dozen participants in after-school and summer camp programs to hundreds of kids over the years. The nonprofit is now celebrating its largest gift in its 35-year history. Here to tell us about what that will mean is Rick Cartilage, the executive director of Sanctuary on 8th Street. Hi, Rick.
Hi, Ann. Thanks for having us today.
Of course. Glad to have you. We're also joined by Amani Walker, a program coach at Sanctuary. Good morning, Amani.
Good morning.
So, Amani, I came across your name looking back at some old articles on Sanctuary, and one featured you as a 10-year-old camper at Sanctuary. It seems now that you are coming full circle and working there with children like yourself when you attended. So tell us what brought you back to Sanctuary. What is it that has had you come home?
Okay. Sanctuary is my first job. I didn't know really where I wanted to work, but I know I wanted a job. I figured, why not go back to something I already know, something that felt like home, Being at the Sanctuary when I was younger, it's a very welcoming place, a safe place. It's not just an after-school program. It's a community. It's like a second home. So I wanted to give that to children as well. So,
yeah. And Rick, remind us a little bit about what Sanctuary does, what it is, how it came to be.
Sure. Located in the heart of the urban core, the Sanctuary on 8th Street is a safe, relationship-centric community serving Jacksonville's At Hope youth, like you said, since 1992. And through its after-school program and summer camp, it provides vitally needed year-round services to the children and families. And so enrichment offerings such as one-on-one tutoring. I'm happy to report we have 2 therapists on staff as well as a speech and hearing team. Enrichment offerings like coding, yoga, art and music, reading and writing. really provide a differentiating and stimulating experience for all the youth. We're trying to really help the children with the 3 C's: their competence, their connection, and most importantly, their confidence. And at the end of the day, the sanctuary is in the business of making long-lasting positive relationships like the one we have here with Imani.
And what brought you to this work in the first place?
I have a background in teaching. I went to school to be an elementary education teacher. I found the job in the paper in 2010, May of 2010.
Back in the paper.
Back in the paper, yes. And I became a camp counselor that summer in 2010, just like Imani's going to be doing for us this summer, and became program director that fall, became ED in 2016.
Yeah, but I mean, what appealed to you? What kind of kept you there?
Sure.
What inspired you about it?
Oh, 100% the children. It's always about the kids. It's about the connections, the relationships, the activities that we can provide. It's a special place to me and my staff and the community.
And about how many kids do you work with on an annual basis, including like the summer camp program and the after school stuff?
Between both programs, we'll welcome close to 150 kids a year. We average around 75 in our after school program. And I'm happy to report we'll have 110 kids on day 1 of summer camp on June 1st.
Wow. And Imani, Rick mentions that you're going to be part of the summer program. So what does that mean for you?
It means this is my second year, so just meeting new kids, creating bonds, creating more memories. It means a lot. I get to teach kids, teaching them how to, be humans. They're like little babies, so I really love working here.
And do you usually tell them that you also attended Sanctuary? Is that something you share with them?
It's pictures all everywhere. They get to, Coach Imani, that's you. So I'd be excited. I'm like, yeah, I was here when I was younger. So
yeah. All right. Well, we're going to have to take a short break. We're going to come back on the other side of the break. We'll talk more about the grant and opportunities for community involvement, but we'll take a break. We'll be back in just 2 minutes.
The Cummer Museum of Art and Gardens presents Art in Bloom, uniting nature and creativity with flowers made of glass, ceramics, paper, wood, and even Lego. On display through September 13th. More information available at cummermuseum.org. Terrell Hogan Law.
I'm Wayne Hogan. Even when we drive defensively, accidents can still happen. Do you know what to do next? There's more to it than you might think.
More at terrellhoganlaw.com.
On the next Fresh Air, how can a politician lie to the electorate and not face legal consequences? Even a lie as consequential as President Trump's claim that he won the 2020 election? In a new book, Andrew Weissman explains how we got here and suggests ways to hold politicians accountable. Weissman was the lead prosecutor in the Mueller investigation. Join us.
Today at noon on WJCT News 89.9.
Officials in Box Elder County, Utah, recently approved a data center that will cover 40,000 acres.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion passes. Thank you very much.
Well, county residents are fighting back. The story of Box Elder County and Americans' fast-rising mistrust of data centers. That's on the next On Point.
Today at 11, here on WJCT News 89.9.
The war in Iran is straining the region's economies and alliances. Gulf states are scrambling to hedge their bets, and the United States is no longer the steady hand it once was. The Middle East's old power map is being redrawn fast. What happens to the Middle East when the world's most powerful broker stops playing peacekeeper? That's next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. If you're just joining us, I am talking to the executive director of Sanctuary on 8th Street, Rick Cartilage, and program coach Amani Walker. We're talking about a sizable grant that the nonprofit got recently for its work. Rick, tell us a little bit, first of all, about how this donation came to be, because I understand you were at a community meeting and sort of talking about the needs that Sanctuary has.
Yes, our associate director, Alexis Stuka, was presenting at a downtown Rotary meeting, and we were requesting some money for tables and chairs, and a representative from the Hume Foundation reached out after the meeting and was interested in giving. And we wrote a proposal about making some changes to our campus and presented that to them, and they were on board. And like you said, this is the largest one-time gift that we've ever received. This is a
$250,000 gift.
That's correct. And it's going to really transform our campus. As some of your listeners may know, and for those who do not, we reside in a 98-year-old post office building. So it has a lot of challenges and quirks, right, that we work around. So this gift is really going to enhance the building. We're going to have a welcome lobby for our parents and staff and kids that we don't have right now. We're going to enhance our playroom, add an outdoor classroom. And one of the things we're most excited about that we're going to implement this summer is a new lunch program. We are going to be having a catering from Soul Full Eats here in Jacksonville 3 days a week. And we just look forward to making these changes real soon here on June 1st.
Amani, what is that going to mean for you as someone that works there? What are you looking forward to with these changes? How might it change either the experience that the kids have or the work that you're doing?
It may, I think it'll create more opportunities, gather more kids' attention, probably make it more funner, definitely. The kids, it's going to be a first, so they're definitely going to be excited about it. I think it's a first for us too, so I think it's going to be a great experience.
And in terms of the nutrition program, what kind of needs are the kids that are served by the Sanctuary experiencing? What is particularly when it comes to nutrition needs or fill-ins for gaps that they might be experiencing when it comes to meals?
We give out bags of foods to them every Friday, I believe. If I'm not right, I'm wrong. And that's not the only time. It's another bag. I'm not sure where it's from, but we give out that as well every month to the kids. So
we have a partnership with the Junior League that provides food once a month, and then we provide food the other 3 weeks with our weekend nutrition program.
And that's like supplies that go home with the kids to their families.
Yes,
Correct.
ma'am.
And we also survey the families on this, so we're buying things that they will be using. So we're talking about fruits and vegetables, protein, things of that sort.
Okay. And I see that one of the play spaces is described as a sensory development and play space that Sanctuary is looking at. Can you tell us a little bit about what that would feel like, look like, what that translates into?
Yeah. It's an exciting experience for the kids. We're really intentional on free play at the Sanctuary. The playroom is in much need of an overhaul. This will just be a space where they can come. Colors will be warmer. We're going to replace the paint and just make it an experience that's, all-encompassing to children of all ages.
Yeah. One of the things that Sanctuary does is take some field trips with the kids. Are there any memories that you have of those experiences that
Of
stayed with you?
course. I love, we go during the summer. It's a lot of field trips. We go to the beach. We go to the springs. We go to a water park in Georgia. We go a lot of places. It's fun because the kids, when I used to go there, my brothers attended. It was very fun. I had a lot of friends, so it was really fun.
Is it a different experience now that you're in charge of the kids?
Definitely. I'm reliving the memories there with the kids. So I'll be being a kid myself as well while I'm there. So it's very fun. Very fun.
Rick, just remind us who your target audience is. We mentioned that you're on 8th Street. You're in Springfield. The community surrounding there, is that your primary audience and client base?
The majority of the children attend Andrew Robinson, R.L. Brown, Springfield Middle, KIPP off of Gulf Air. So kids are not necessarily living in historic Springfield, but just on the outskirts and attending those schools that are on the outskirts of Springfield.
East Side as well.
Correct.
Yeah. And what kind of needs do they have? Like, is there something that they present with in order to qualify to be a part of Sanctuary?
They need to attend those schools that I mentioned. We've really never turned any kids away. We do have waiting lists from time to time. We do have a waiting list right now for summer camp. But kids are attending the local elementary schools and middle schools. We are K through 8th after school and summer camp program. And so they need to be between the ages of 5 and 15 to come to our program.
And just briefly, we mentioned the Warren and August Hume Foundation in Ponte Vedra gave this grant, but what needs remain and what can the community do if they want to participate or help out?
There's always a chance to come down and volunteer with our kids and make those connections. That's a powerful time to connect. The need to continue to tell your network about Sanctuary. We still, even though we've been around for 34 years, we still get, what is the Sanctuary? Where is that? So having the community come and learn about us is always an important thing. And we have a great event every year called the Shindig. It's our annual fundraiser. It'll be October 1st this year. It's in the Phoenix Art District at the Emerald Station. So attending that event and learning more is always a great chance to get out and learn about Sanctuary.
Right. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. It's great to meet you. Amani Walker, Rick Cartilage, Sanctuary on 8th Street. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having us.
All right. And thank you for listening. Join us tomorrow, please. We're going to be talking about the Jacksonville Jazz Fest lineup from P-Funk and Esperanza Spalding to Nile Rodgers and Chic. Sorry. I'm Ann Schindler. You've been listening to First Coast Connect on WJCT News 89.9.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
The North Florida TPO is dedicated to transportation planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, resilient, and connected region. More information available at northfloridatpo.com. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.
Wolfson Children's Hospital, where generations of families have found hope. Because it's here at Wolfson Children's where answers are found, odds are beaten, and comebacks begin every day. Wolfson Children's, always here. Visit wolfsonchildrens.com.
This is WJCT News